All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed your break, and we're ready for the second panel of the afternoon. The second panel of the afternoon is under the title Art and Identity. And I'm just going to very briefly introduce the moderator for the afternoon. Marianne Milford Lutzker is Professor of Asian Art History and holds the Carver Chair in East Asian Studies, and is the chair of the Department of Art and Art History at Mills College. She's a graduate of the PhD program here at UC Berkeley, and we're pleased to invite her up to moderate this afternoon's program. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Korean group here at Berkeley for inviting us to participate in this symposium. I'm at Mills College, and I've been involved with the exhibition In Between Places, which has been curated by Linda Cho, and also by H.J. Kim Han, Jeong Kim Han, who is the Associate Curator of Korean Art at the Asian Art Museum. And we've also been working with our director, Stephanie Hayner, and it's been a really inspiring experience working with the artists. We actually started out with 9 artists, and now we landed up with 8 artists. Living artists is so different. My own background originally was in archaeology and Sanskritic studies in actually South Asia, and their stones don't talk back to you. You dig in the ground and that's fine. But here, when you're working with living artists, it's always a situation of accommodating, of communicating, and compromise. And it's been really wonderful. It's a beautiful exhibition, and I hope that all of you will have an opportunity to see it. I found the first half of this afternoon's symposium to be very moving. I'm also an immigrant, came under very different circumstances. However, a lot speaks to me as an immigrant as well. Yes, I do speak English, but still, one's always an outsider. One can never be right inside. And so a lot that Inson and HJ have addressed in the exhibition, I found applies to many of us from all different backgrounds and ethnicities. And it's very profound. And I found the 3 papers or presentations that were given just earlier before the break really moving. Just hearing about the experiences of the early immigrants coming over. I had no idea that the time before Angel Island or anything like that. And I think this is where Korea has been sort of overlooked a lot, because yes, the focus has been primarily on, especially here, Angel Island, the Chinese, and then the Japanese. And so it was really interesting to hear another part of this story. And I found the poetry and the writing really beautiful as well, very, very moving. So I want to introduce, that's enough about me and Mills, and I want to introduce now our speakers. First of all, we have Inson Linda Cho, whom I've known for many years now, actually, a long time. Linda was actually one of my students, both at the Asian Art Museum during the sort of docent program. I think that's how we first met, and then as an undergraduate. And then after Mills, she went on to do graduate work at San Jose State, and did her work in contemporary, I think it was like Asian American, Korean American art, and did a wonderful exhibition on her thesis, and that was held down in a museum down in Silicon Valley. And then after that, she went to the Asian Art Museum and was an associate or assistant curator there for many years, and then became an independent curator. And it was at that time that we worked together I was actually provost at the time, and we came up, and I was acting director of the museum too, all of these hats that we were wearing. And In-sung came up to me with this wonderful idea of an exhibition focusing on women activist artists from Korea. And so we did this exhibition called The Offering Table. It was amazing. Installation was beautifully done, but it was a very moving experience of the women artists who have stood up to a very patriarchal, very conservative community, a lot of their art being destroyed, very strong women. And the installation was so moving, we actually had people burst into tears and crying over it. I mean, I was thinking of the pillows in particular. I'm still looking at In-sung right now. So we've had a wonderful time working together. You've done many other exhibitions, and now we have Dwelling, or the In-Between Places, which addresses essentially the identity and the search for identity and who are we all, in very meaningful ways. The other thing about the exhibition, which I really love, is the intergenerational artists. We've got artists who are in their 20s, and we've got artists in their 70s. So we're seeing the whole sort of span. But one thing has struck me about, well, I'm at Mills, a women's college, and so our undergraduate work students are all women, and our graduate students are 50-50. But I was also struck by the fact that the panelists in the first group were all women, and we've only got one male artist in the exhibition, and maybe In-sung, you might sort of talk to that. Also, we did the activist artists were women artists as well, and I think some of the strongest artists today in Korea are women artists. And I think that's saying a lot for the situation of women in particular. So the two artists who are going to speak with us today, Jeong Kim and Minji Sohn, are two artists here in the Bay Area, and I'm just going to introduce you just alphabetically by your last name. So Jeong Kim was born in Seoul, and when she came, well, actually trained as a writer, and thought she was going to be a writer until she came to this country. And then she started experimenting with art, then went to the California College of the Arts and investigated ceramics and became a superb ceramicist. As some of you may be familiar with her work, there's a certain sort of sense of whimsy about it, but it also addresses the situation of sort of women too. The first time I saw her art was an installation of this crazy accumulation of cups and saucers, all at strange angles, and it was quite humorous in a way, but also addressing more serious sort of circumstances that surround women, women's work, women's environment as well. And she continues with that, with her installation at Mills right now, in how she portrays women with books on their head. Women learn. Women are not just confined to the domestic situation, or if they are, they can still think, which I think is really important. And then the other artist, Minji Sohn, she's a performance artist who has a very rich background. She was actually born in Japan and then raised in Korea and then in Canada, and now she is in the Bay Area. She received her BFA from the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the truly outstanding art institutions in the United States. Then came to California and got her MFA also at the California College of the Arts. I loved her work when I first saw it at the Chinese Culture Center. You were doing a performance, and it was you were seated and just writing. And when the pile of papers, you would write something on paper and put it down, write and paste. And you were just sitting there. And then there was, trash, what's it? Shredder, said something, the shredder there. And so when the pile grew so big, then you would just shred them. And you were sitting in this big room, completely filled with all the shreds and all the paper. And I mean, it's interesting because you bring attention to the mundane things in life, the repetitive things we do. Sometimes one becomes absolutely obsessive about things, and one doesn't realize it, and you sort of bring attention to that in a very sort of aesthetic way. And it sort of makes me very conscious every time I shred a piece of paper. Why do we shred things? We're so frightened in case our names are on it, our social security numbers are on it, our privacy is being invaded. These were things that didn't worry us 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But now we are sort of overwhelmed by that. And so I think also, your installation too, turn right, turn left, turn right. What am I? Am I Korean? Am I American? Up, down, left. And it's quite sort of bewildering in a way. And I don't know how you could stand up after your performance at the opening. You must have been so dizzy. So anyway, very obsessive, very repetitive, and also very ordinary as well. So with that, I would like to invite you. Let's see. Shall we start with Linda? Insom. Okay.
I would like to first thank everyone from the Center for Korean Studies at Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, especially Stephanie Kim as she's walking out the door, and Laura Nelson and Diane Cho, who I think brought us together at first, and Mills College Art Museum, Stephanie Hayner and Jana, who is not here, for their efforts in organizing this symposium and the exhibition. This exhibition and this symposium highlight the transnational experiences of Korean Americans in the Bay Area. And I say Bay Area because most of the artists had resided in the Bay Area when we first began planning this show. But at least two of the youngest artists have become kind of migratory. And I think that's how the young people live these days. They're very nomadic and they adapt almost anywhere. I would like to say a special thanks to Jeong Kim, who, as my cohort, as a co-curator in this exhibition, made it really meaningful and worthwhile. And it really brought a lot of happiness and joy to me. The exhibition In Between Places validates the sentiments of millions who migrate and relocate to a million unfamiliar places, past and present. By that, I mean to say that for whatever reasons, people leave one place of familiarity and become a transplant in a different world. There's that trans word again. I think we all kind of use that a lot. In Between Places attempts to connect the experiences of a greater audience through visual media. This is the story of America, about immigrants whose life was almost always defined by struggles, especially for the earlier generations of Koreans. And I'm especially really proud of the fact that we have multi-generations in this exhibition. Being in a strange, unfamiliar place presents huge disabilities, not unlike suddenly becoming blind and mute, having to relearn basic survival skills. And I was talking to Young Mi, and I think that comes from my own experience, having been transplanted here when I was 14 and with no English background at all. I didn't even know how to say hello. And so I literally felt like I became deaf and mute, basically. The process of assimilation is gradual and eventually becomes part of the collective history of all who traveled similar paths. These are artists in the show, and that is Hyunjang and I, 인증샷, or like taking a evidence picture. This exhibition documents 8 Korean American artists' experiences and their perceptions. For some of the artists in this exhibition, it was an emotional journey of how they lived, about their identity and what being in America represented for them. The artworks in the show were all created specifically for the exhibition, and it was a delight to witness the creative processes of the artists. For the curators, myself and Hyunjang, working on this project was a rare chance to commune with like-minded artists to create a dialogue about Korean American experience. As curators, our role was to facilitate for the artists in between places with the task of conveying their particular experience of living, belonging to the spaces of in-between. The 8 artists represent various stages of being in America, ranging in age from their 20s to the 70s. It's an ultimate compliment when I'm able to work with artists to create an exhibition that resonates with the audience. And I would like to now show you some of the artwork in the show. 2 of the artists in the exhibition, as mentioned by Marianne, Jeong Bae and Minji Sohn, will present their own papers. So my talk about them will be abbreviated or none at all, depending on time situation. This slide is of Mirin Lee, and it's called Hills and Water, and it's made with rami, silk, and thread. I have organized my exhibition in the order of installation as you enter the museum space. So this is the first piece of artwork installed that you will see when you enter the museum. Mirin Lee studied product design in college and is now a fabric artist trained in the traditional methods. Korean fabric tradition is very diverse and includes the art of bojagi or wrapping cloths. From this tradition, Mirin has created 3-dimensional work in an installation that describes a landscape of Korea and California with the Pacific Ocean or waters in between all the colors, all the colors of the water. This is a detail of the Korea side of the bojagi on the left. And this is the California side of the installation. And this is what you see in the middle there is all the colors of the water. Using rami fabric handed down from her mother, she created with needle and thread the valleys and hills she found in both countries. And she really captures, during this whole process, we met with Mirin various times and talked about how unfamiliar California landscape was when she first came here. And she was really dismayed by the greenness of winter and the dead color, kind of brown and golden hills of summer. And so these were elements of the environment that made her feel long for home, for Korea. And she captured that sentiment, I think, beautifully in this work. And next artist is Sohyang Choi, and her video work is called Repetitious Dream. For fear of time is familiar to all of us. As we go through life, there is all-pervasive feeling that we must rush in order to achieve, to play catch-up, especially for recent transplants to America. This is a theme in Sohyang Choi's work, Repetitious Dream. The video work shows only her feet running continuously through the streets in her neighborhood in Sacramento, and sometimes even without shoes. Watching the video, I'm not going to play the whole video for you. It'll take up too much time. Watching the video leaves no doubt as to the collective sentiments that we must run to accomplish our goals. Soyoung's work, I feel, can easily resonate for many of us as we live our lives and never enough time with demands of daily life and fear of not being able to live up to our commitments. And this last video shows her work. She writes this as if in a diary, and then she runs it in reverse so that it looks like she's erasing everything she's meant to do. It's a really poignant work, and we were happy to have her in the show. And she's also an MFA graduate of Mills College, so it was nice to have a alumni in the show. And next artist is Kei Gang, and her work is My Journey. There's 3 separate components to her installation, and they are My Journey, that's the 5-panel paintings, Guests Mist, it's the one single painting on the right, and then from east to west are the feet and the stockinged or pasan-clad feet. Kei Gang represents an artist exploring her innermost self and her history. She is an untiring researcher. As a young woman, living all that she knew to come to America meant much sacrifice and hard work. For this exhibition, Kei found old pasan, or these are socks that goes with traditional clothes, or traditional socks, apt metaphor for her journey through life. Old and darned many times, these pasan represented for her a physical manifestation of the footsteps taken. The other work is titled Guests Mist. That is a little detail from the Guest Mist. The work combines pages of guest registry from her grandmother's funeral, written in beautiful calligraphic style by her father. The pages are evidence of how Kei was not present for this and many other important events. And these are some more details. And this is my fourth time working with Kei in an exhibition, and I'm always touched by her sentiments for having immigrated to U.S. and some of the heartfelt stories that she has to tell about how much she missed out in her family life back in Korea. And next we have Youngjun Yu, and these are a series of paintings titled Encounters, Midday Encounters. An avid scholar, Youngjun Yu represents for me an iconic artist. Well-versed in both the Western and Eastern philosophy, religion, and literary traditions, Youngjun tirelessly travels the world to investigate and researches to find greater artistic vocabulary. In Midday Encounters, she references the classic literatures and philosophy of East and West as a universal theme. The symbolic figures in the stone pagodas represents personifications of superheroes and a connection to her ancestors. She suggests that for her, the top, or let me see if I have a represents for her the stone pagodas, classical references to portals in both Western and Eastern philosophy, and universal symbol that can perhaps transcend physical space to the realm of the divine. The brilliant gold prominently on her work represents the intensity of the sun or the spirituality conveyed in the painting. And these are these are two works that's kind of inside this space that she has. She prefers the viewers to form their own interpretation of her work, and she does not enjoy telling people what her work exactly is. And so she really means to open up a dialogue about what her work is all about. And it's not necessary, her interpretation is not necessary to assert her own inspiration for the work. The next artist that I want to show you work is the one male in the show. We as like Marianne alluded to earlier, we had another artist, and that was also a male, but he due to issues that were beyond his control, he had to return to Korea. Nicholas Oh, or his Korean name is Oh Dae-han, one of the younger artists in this exhibition, actively engages in socio-political issues that are prominent in our lives. Justice or Else is a direct iteration on current events and has directly affected many people of color. Serving in the military enabled him to see the entrenched racism and stereotypes that is still pervasive in America. He engages the audience with these images to open a dialogue about their own perceptions when confronted by a circle of armed police officers, or can you even imagine it? That is, I think, his premise. To see beyond the superficial knowledge of what Asian American really is and how you can, that there is no way to, that it is stereotyped. I actually, in quotes, he says, I actually identify with American culture more than my ancestral Korean culture, putting me somewhere in between being neither American or Korean. And this is a different view, and that small figure is another piece in this exhibition called Chink Sugi. It's a play on word of a Japanese method of mending broken and imperfect ceramics, in kintsugi. And I think he really wants people to start talking about what their perceptions are and how accurate should there be a judgment on who you are as a person. There's a small detail, and this image combines a lot of different Asian motifs. So it's not really just Korean. It could be Japanese. So when people first see you, that perception may not always be right. Is what I think his assertion. And last but not least is artist Jana Beck, and she is the oldest of the artists in the show, in her 70s. And she did this very large installation called The Chorus of Trees. She says, in quote, a tree is a universal symbol. Every tree is unique, end quote. This sentiment is expressed in the installation Chorus of Trees by Jana Beck. She also suggests that her work is strongly influenced by the light quality in California and India, where she visited in 1990. Yoni's work in the In-Between Places is a very large installation with 48 hanging paintings and a floor piece resembling a forest on which the audience is allowed to walk in and experience it as if you are in the forest, as in a forest. There's a plexiglass over the whole floor piece. I can't remember how big the piece is, but I think it's like 26 by 26, 26 feet by 26. And here's a detail. And this is my last slide. And my final thought, as you can see, the artists in this exhibition were inspired by the notion of being in between places, and their creative journey ended in the fruition of this exhibition. Please keep watching to see where all these artists will go. Thank you for allowing me the pleasure of presenting this exhibition to you this afternoon.
My title is What Identity? And I don't have any description in the catalog. And I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about it. So I just leave it out with some mystery. So when I heard the word identity from my undergraduate professor, my first thought was, identity? What identity? I thought I already had an identity. I have established the platform of a personal, social, and cultural identity while I was growing up and being educated in Korea. I didn't think of any importance of that subject matter then. However, the identity I had was from Korea, not from US. It seems the new society I became the part of given me a different social and cultural identity already, without mutual agreement. It was given to me based on my ethnicity and an appearance and my F2 visa. Did this match with my identity at the time? Obviously, it wasn't. There was a conflict between two identities. I thought I didn't have to even think about it. I even kept myself as a foreigner, as an outsider. I was totally fine with that. I'm going to go back to Korea soon. Then, when my son was born in the US later, few years later, the identity issue revisited me. My son was about 5 years old. We were taking baths in the evening as usual. Out of blue, he asked me, "Mom, why my last name is Kim?" I was a bit confused at first with his question, but quickly I responded to him. Of course, your last name is Kim because you're born in Kim family. Having Kim as your last name means you are a grandson of wonderful, loving grandfather. Remember how grandfather used to play with you when you visited him in Korea? How he swing you around in the like an airplane. He played together with your car in his office. How fun was that? How nice he was. Then I saw the sweet smile sprayed on my son's face. At the time, what I was saying was reminding him that the connection he has with ancestry through last name Kim. Jeong Smith? Jeong Smith, can you wash your hair now? I asked that question to him. My son looked at me and thought a bit with a tilted head, then started giggling. And he said, "That is a little strange. That is not my name, Mom." And he started playing with the yellow rubber duck on the bubbly water. With a conversation with him in the bathtub, I sensed that he just realized he's different than others. 5 years old. When he goes to the preschool. And he wondered why. And probably wondered why he has a different name and appearance. I guess it might have been my son's first or maybe second time that he aware the issue of identity and inquiry of identity issue, perhaps. So identity issue came back to me with much more weighted issue than I imagined. Because my great responsibility to raise and support my son as a mother while he was building his personal and educational identity. At the same time, the motherhood instinct alarmed me to protect my son from the discriminating society that I experienced while he was defining his social, cultural identity on his own. The identity issue was not something I could ignore any longer because the U.S. became my home. I felt I need to understand and educate myself about the identity issues and my relationship with the society I belong to. What identity changed into yes identity? I believe the identity is sound and solid identity is the engine of the one's life. It can change with the time and the location, but it cannot avoid or nor ignored. It is inevitable issue that need to be dealt with as long as I live, no matter where I live. I believe it is a work in progress. So that was my introduction, my story about identity. And let's go to the slide, a little more fun. Okay, where's the slide? So this one called Fish and Salt. This performance with traditional Korean music. The movement was inspired by Korean dance with a slow version. I may say that it is ritual movement rather than dance. So through the go to the next one. Oops, this one. So through the very slow and rhythmic movement, I move around and dance, walking forward to a little bit more. Okay. Then while it happened, I took off the first layer of top. And then I took out, I'm just going to read it. And then I took out the fish from the sleeve, and I covered the fish with a salt. I had a fish and salt in my sleeve. And then the salt preserved the fish. Fish image to me is a very basic, vibrant energy that we all have. And then preserved with the salt is maybe bearing something into preserving something, your being, and then moving to something else. And when the skirt was being stretched enough because of the rock at the end of the skirt, the forward movement cannot be continued. The rock's presence is holding whole intended forward movement and everything. And after some struggle, I took up the layer of the skirt and walked away freely. So this performance expressed the emotional, physical struggle and the process of changing. To peel off the existing identity, to create, or to meet, or to embrace a new identity. So this work is called a time card. So when I work in my studio, I make a little tablet like that. And the front, I stamp the date. And then in the back, I have a description what I did and a duration of the time. Just a little record of what I did in that day in my studio. And I borrowed the notion of conventional time card system used at workspace. But I'm making my own time card with clay. So I'm writing something in there. And then I put it in the little case, put it and I keep it over there. So this work investigated where the reward of being an artist is. It seems there's no measurement of a reward exists for the artist, who works as much as other professions, perhaps more. As I make my own clay time card and a time card being accumulated, it visualized the time I work as an artist. The next one called, image is not really great, sorry. Okay. It's much better in here. I don't know. Okay. So this one called Project CU. Sorry about the blurry image. But as you can see, there's lines of bodies. As a person who speaks two different languages, I might learn every new word, every day until I die in English. But also, I learn, as I get familiar with the culture in America, I learn slangs, different slangs and stuff. But I notice there's a little difference, a little contrast between slang in English and slang in Korean. It seems like I have a little more emotional freedom in English. I'm not really bound to, I cannot speak that word, not at all. I'm a little bit easy with that. But in Korean slang, I cannot even start the first syllable, even though nobody will understand around me. So that was an interesting experience. So, and then it's like, because the language I speak as native language is carry a huge background of cultural conditioned by my culture. In English, I don't have much. So when I speak a Korean language, I am very Korean. So it was kind of interesting experience. Among others, among others in many things that I realized in bilingual and bicultural person in America. So that experience inspired this piece. So I I researched slang for woman's intimate part of body, And so I select some of them and I visualize the image and then I made the object with that. So I wanted to add, usually the slang for that is kind of like shady, degrade the woman, usually from men. So I wanted to put beauty and the humor. So it's kind of get a spotlight to it. So let me show, hopefully next image is a little better. So I'm sorry about that, but next one? Oh yeah, it's much better. So the one at the first one is a cake. I know maybe most of you know about everything or maybe not. And the second one is from Chinese culture. It's a red ball. And the third one is alpha and omega. Most important. First and most important means, so I made a book and I stamped it alpha and omega or love. And I keep repeating them. And the third one is man in the boat. I think it's a certain part, shape of the certain part. And then other one is honey pot, and then there is a hairy donut, fur cups, and so, you know, one of my colleagues asked me, Ron, how could you make that piece? So why? What's wrong with that? So again, so maybe the word is not from my own culture. So I'm a little bit easy with that. Also, it fascinates me also at the same time. So I didn't have any problem to make piece and visualize it and research it and show to it. But some of my friends from American culture, they were like, ooh, that was interesting. So next one is in Miss Curry's show right now. The days like the feathers. The title of this work is The Days Like Feathers. This means, this title originated from Korean proverbs, and it means, vaguely means, so many days are left or passed already. That means like 1,000,000 days. Although it doesn't make sense in English, I think. But that's why I like it. It's kind of like there's an extra space, you know, all over it a little bit. So these figures are objects on their head, signify different role of evolved identity through various stages of my life, as well as others. So I'm just gonna go through it a little bit. So this one is the figure with the house on top. So maybe represent housewife or real estate agent. And this one is fish. Again, the same fish. Same kind of mean. And this is cake. It could be that same cake that I made it in different work, or it could be something, you know, some bakery, beautiful pastry. And this is a flower, 20s. This is a book, education, reading a book to the child, maybe domestic core. There's another image over here. And this one is the show that Marian was mentioning in Asian Art Museum. So sometimes people ask me, where are you from? I know why they ask me, what they ask me. And then I said, I'm from Berkeley. Or maybe I'm a little bit tired to answer the questions, or maybe I'm a little bit seasoned as a Korean American. But sometimes I think about it like, am I American or am I Korean or Korean American? I don't know which one is right for me. So maybe I should call myself Californian. I don't know, do I have to have a title? Maybe not. But sometimes I have to kind of say something about it. So it's kind of like an in-between place, but I kind of like in-between place too. I don't have much complaint about it. But sometimes it's a little difficult. But as long as I understand I'm in between place and then not betraying any of them and cooperate with both sides, I think it's great. So I'm happy to be in between place. And let it be that way for now. Thank you so much.
Hello. It's really been an honor to work with everyone for the exhibition and for this symposium. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be here to speak today. As far back as I can remember, I've always been afraid of ghosts. I was an imaginative child. I had elaborate nightmares, frequent sleep paralysis, and there were instances where I thought I saw ghosts or heard their voices calling to me. Growing up with this constant fear of ghosts, I developed numerous habits such as checking under the bed, behind me, however many times, and counting or speaking out loud, which would silence the ghosts. These repetitive actions that were at the time intuitive or instinctual naturally transfer themselves into my practice as I started to make art later on. In my performances, I formularize, I count, and I repeat. In this exhibition titled Again and Again and Again, in particular, I directly connected the repetitive process of my work to my personal history by reenacting two scenes from my childhood. The first one of the two that you see here is called A Sea of Sand and was inspired by a story that my mom had told me. When I was a toddler, she would take me to the playground, and instead of playing with the other kids or interacting with different things, I would sit in one spot, scoop the sand and pour it in the bucket, scoop the sand and pour it in the bucket. And when the bucket was full, I would pour it out and start over. Across the room from the sand, there was another recreation of events from my childhood titled A Sea of Books. Lastly, these are the coloring sheets created by Angelica Colliard, which were exhibited on the wall and also as takeaways for the audience to take home. I asked Angelica to draw the installations and my performances, then I had to describe to her what these ghosts that will surround me should look like, the things I fear. To visualize these ghosts, I definitely get the help from the media and popular culture. And ghosts are culturally different too. There are Korean ghosts, Japanese ghosts, Western ghosts. But it's hard to put just one face to it. The ghost is this ambiguous matter, and it changes and transforms itself into multiple faces, or voices, feelings, or even temperatures. So what exactly is it that I fear? Who is this ghost that follows me everywhere I go? And where does it come from? Trying to answer these questions has been a journey, and there is definitely not just one answer. My experiences could be interpreted in so many different ways, either psychologically, religiously, sociologically, philosophically. But our topic today is the Korean American experience and its intersections with artistic production. So I'm going to talk about my Korean American experience, another personal history of mine, and how that relates to my work as well, hoping that it all ties together at the end. I grew up in Korea until I was 11 years old, and the summer of 6th grade, I first went to Ontario, Canada to study. A little longer than anticipated, I would then stay in North America for 14 years until I was 25, after 4 graduation certificates and having lived in Toronto, Chicago, New York, and the Bay Area. So for 14 years, especially all throughout adolescence and early adulthood, my identity has been the international student, the foreign student, the 유학생. In high school, I was in a boarding school in Canada, and all of us study abroaders there were, of course, always hungry for Korean food, but also very casually splitting our lives into 2, spending 3 months of the year back home in Korea with our families, and the other 9 months in a foreign land, speaking a foreign language. The title of this piece is Lost Homes, and it was created for an exhibition titled 1, 2, 3, 4, 500 at a temporary project space by Minnesota Street Project. The piece was performed throughout the course of the exhibition for about a month. Here I have a 3-inch tall piece of steel in the shape of a house, and I strike the house 100 times with a metal hammer, counting each strike out loud. Every 100 strikes, I fold 1 paper house and set it on the floor. Over time, while the paper houses grow in number and fill up more space in the gallery, the steel house slowly deteriorates and loses its form. While this work was a reflection upon the current housing situations in the Bay Area, leading to displacement and relocation of artists and galleries, at the same time, it also reflected my much older experiences of growing up as a foreign student, moving from country to city, and the idea of home always fluctuating. This wall piece called Ash Homes was done with using ash, using my finger. I hammered each house was drawn, I hammered a nail into the wall, which causes the ash on the wall to fall off. In these 2 pieces, I see homes portrayed as ghostly. They are fragile, ephemeral beings that are always shifting and being created and destroyed. They stand as shadows of the past, all the places I've lived or could have stayed, as accumulated melancholic memories of numerous farewells. The actions of counting and organizing the houses can be interpreted as rooted in a need to provide certainty and stability to ideas that are deprived of them, and an effort to process the unquantifiable, the unknown. My background made me curious about why are there so many Asian, especially Korean international students? What is it about the Korean society that makes it normal for 10, 11-year-olds to be separated from their families and home country to study abroad for prolonged periods? And finally, what makes young mothers in Korea today so eager to have their toddlers' ABCs mastered, even before they've sufficiently spoken the Korean language? On the Department of Homeland Security's website, Study in the States, you can find data about the international students in the United States updated quarterly. The current total number of Korean international students in the U.S. is 71,206, 11% of which are primary and secondary students. Although on a decline, Korea still ranks as the 3rd country in the world for its number of students sent to the United States after India and China. However, Korea sends more students per capita to the US than any other country, standing 19 times than India. The significant number of international students illustrates the study abroad phenomenon in Korea as a byproduct of its crazed, competitive educational and employment system. We all know the story of the education-obsessed countries in Asia where there are tiger mothers and cram schools that operate until 10 p.m. With such a huge social focus on success, everything and everyone is graded. Learning English is especially considered crucial in one's life. In the post-colonial era where English is the language of the world, speaking English fluently is thought to be one of the vital skills one must have in order to be successful in the competitive job market in Korea. Many say that it is best to start teaching your kids English or to send them abroad as early as possible because children are more likely to develop better English pronunciation and are more easily assimilated into Western culture. From a culture obsessed with achievement, I came to America to be better at English, to have better education, because this is a better environment for children to be raised. I investigate this sense of betterness in my art, where the fantastical land of perfection is both an object of desire and mourning. This piece is called Bad Girl, Bad, Bad Girl, Bad, Bad Girl, Bad, Bad, Bad Girl. For about a year, I filled the whole roll of canvas, stamping the sentence, I am a bad girl, repeatedly. The number of bad increases by 1 each time. For example, I am a bad girl, I am a bad, bad girl, I am a bad, bad, bad girl. When I make a mistake, I must start over from 1 bad. In this work, 12 Hours of Perfect, I typed the word perfect on a typewriter for 12 hours. The object was to get a full page of perfects, which went on the wall. When a mistake was made, such as a typo, the sheet was immediately discarded onto the floor, and I began on a new page. The inherent failure that exists within the attempt to reach success is highlighted further in this work, especially with its mundane office-like setting, which speaks to the outside world. In this way, 12 Hours of Perfect can be thought of as a visualization of internalized social anxieties, which the impossible dream of perfection provides the fodder for. With South Korea's economic and diplomatic dependency on America after the Korean War, there is still a national psyche of trauma, shame, and a sense of inferiority that surfaces throughout everyday life. Such strong emotions of both resent and admiration arise merely around the word abroad. How do these bigger socioeconomic structures relate to my particular case of studying abroad? As a young Korean travels to America, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, have the ghosts of imperialism been passed on and inscribed onto her mind and blood? In Toni Morrison's Beloved, the voices coming from the house 124 are all the Black people who have been lynched, murdered, raped, and broken by slavery. They are the unspoken and unspeakable thoughts of the women of 124. Perhaps the voices I've heard are the sufferings of the Korean people who have been through war, injustice, residing in the collective unconsciousness, demanding to be heard and remembered. In this performance, Turn Right, Turn Left, I reenact my relationship with the casual small talker who asked me, where are you from? Which side of Korea are you from, north or south? From conversations in everyday life to going through airport security, we are constantly asked for disclosure of our identity, for assurance that we are on the right side. In this work, obeying the authoritarian voice, I turn right, then left again. However, this action of compliance leads to no resolution or final destination. The action of turning is a physicalization of psychological conflict within private lives, but also an embodiment of society itself in agitation, which totters along with its members. In Turn Right, Turn Left, the two opposite forces of the right and the left exist side by side, overlap, and conflict with each other, one another simultaneously. In this context, my performances are exercises to embrace, highlight, judge, and process my experiences of both large and small, real and imagined oppressions. The ghost is the inner workings of racism and misogyny. It is a gaze from the other that objectifies and surveils. The ghost is a separated and protected self, preserved from social demands and judgments, and it can also be other things at the same time. The connection between my ghost and my experiences as an early study abroader is much more complicated than simply cause and effect. It is there in betweenness. For me, both things serve as a reminder not to divide real from unreal, or west from east, and to accept multiple identities, realities, and explanations that exist in tandem. Thank you.
So we have barely any time. Maybe we could take a few questions, just generally, if anybody would like to ask the artists.
I think we should have everyone come up first.
Okay. Well, you need it because you're going to be doing it. Sure. Okay. Questions. Do we have any questions before we talk between ourselves? I can't see any. Well, I found a comment. Am I on? Okay. A comment that you, and also you were making, I mean, everybody's sort of reacting to, well, where are you from? Who are you? Type of thing. And your comment was exasperation, frustration, Californian. And I had to laugh because that's what I call myself too.
Oh, really?
Yes. People sort of can't figure out who I am either. And I thought that was a very interesting thing because I think the majority of people now really in California are from elsewhere.
Yeah, the second person said that to me.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. And I was sort of very interested in also your experience of going to boarding school. And that is a very British thing. And why are they sending all the Korean children to boarding schools? And I know in England in particular, there's a certain status and class issue of going to a boarding school and the education that you get that sets you apart from going to sort of public schools. But it means from the age of 7 or 8, you're on your own. And I was just wondering if that's all part of it as well, the social situation. Maybe you could speak to that and how you felt as a child going off, because I went to boarding school too, so.
The English education in Korea is definitely also a class issue because English kindergartens that are popular now and the private tutoring and sending their children abroad for better pronunciation. People who can afford to do that, they can do that. So from 4-year-olds, one child can say hello in English and the other can't. Then right there you can see their financial status becomes. So it is. So that is relevant. And then going to boarding school.
How did you feel, I mean, as a child being sent? How did you feel yourself? I mean, because I'm seeing some of this reflected now in your art.
Yeah.
And this,
I think probably many friends and I at the time, because we were so young and it's just very normal for us, that decision to go study abroad, you could as a child you could agree, oh yeah, I want to go, but it's not really your decision. And then in that actual time, maybe it's just it is just the norms. But after you grow up and you look back in your life, and you can see in how in so many ways that experience has shaped who I am as a person and an artist.
are there any questions from the audience?
I have one question, and that is, I love the pieces that I saw, and I loved the exhibit at Mills. It's just a really wonderful process to be there. And I actually am wondering, given the theme of being in between and the specificity of Korean American positionality, do you think about the audience, and do you think about some ideal type of person coming to experience your work as you're composing and creating your work? Or is your work coming from the inside out, not from an imagined reception?
Well, I think artist. I think artist work is always somehow all the experience, what knowledge and everything get into our. I call it a pond in my mind, and it all got kind of dissolved into there, and then it became something else. And then I think that's how we express and what we create. So it's from inside, and our own dialogue, our own images. But at the same time, when we actually put as an art frame, we have to think about how we communicate with the viewers. Are they going to get where I am, even though it's in big category? So, yes, both of them. Maybe you can tell something you get
No,
to observe it.
I was actually asking you if you ever think about what your ideal audience. Is there such a thing, and what do you want an audience to understand about your work?
Oh, I think similarly with Jongran, the art making does come from our own experience and processing, but it does matter that I am doing this performance in front of people and for people to see. So I think mostly my work I abstract. I make motifs or my thoughts abstract so that maybe more people can relate to it in their own ways. And ideal audience, because my performances are mostly so long, maybe on the short side, 3 hours to 12 hours, 24 hours. So I never expect anyone to sit down and look at it for a long time, maybe a couple minutes. But when sometimes there is one person in the gallery and like I'm doing something and then they're there for a very long time and I don't get to see their face, but I feel very connected. And in that moment, I feel like there has been a connection made and it is important.
Any more questions?
It's to Minji. Well, thank you for your art. I should like just stand. Yeah, thank you for your art. I had a question. So a lot of your work, as you mentioned, was based on your experience with coming to America and like having this sort of foreigner sort of experience. Do you still like resonate with like do you still feel like a foreigner in America, or do you feel like that identity of yourself has changed as the years went on?
I do feel like a foreigner here, not necessarily like a bad thing, but I also feel like a foreigner, in Korea too. And I think there are many aspects that in one way we can all be like an outsider. Maybe it is our gender, in many different identificatory so yeah, I think even no matter where I am or if I feel like a foreigner there, I think it will be the similar work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for these great presentations. I was really struck by, even though the title of Dwelling in Between, the immediate, the kind of immediate mapping is to think a bit spatially or geographically. I was really struck by the resonance between your works, but it's clearly so in your work, because all of your work seems to be very time-based art, and it's all about temporality. But yours as well, in terms of the punch card, the time card, so that if we thought about this dwelling in between, not spatially but temporally, like this sense of suspension, because you're also both in terms of the materials you were working with, both really thinking about the relationship between permanence and impermanence, and like the trace that remains and the thing that is ephemeral and evanescent, and so that the punch card is like made on this heavy clay, instead of a piece of paper. And then when you did that work with writing the I Will, what was really striking is like you're having the paper shredding, but what was really striking to me was the imprint that was left on the tablet that bled through, and how that works against the shredding of the paper. And so I wonder that if, thinking about that across each of your works, whether, another way to think about the kind of complexities of Korean American identification can be thought of not spatially, but as there's something about the kind of displacement or bicultural quality that draws our attention to time itself, acutely in a particular way.
Yeah, I think that's very yes.
That
is very good point.
Well done.
That's the really point of intersection between the two bodies of work that I saw.
I think that's one of the good qualities the Korean might have. Enduring, great quality of that. Yeah. Oh, could be Asian quality too. I think I always feel proud of that quality. I can carry that quality, and I'm proud of it, and I love to utilize that in my work and my life. Yeah.
I think also using time in our works in that way too, like time becoming our material. But I think before like being stuck at like the age where you come to America, or when there's a significant event, you get a part of you gets stuck in that time period. So it could be related to that.
Arrested Development.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask with the whole question of time, specifically for Chungran, like you mentioned, like how your son's question prompted you to think about more about your identity. And my question is basically like, you know, now you're okay with being identified as in between, and you said that, but like before you even thought about your identity as a Korean American or in between, like were you identifying as something else before? Like before, what was it about your son's question that really made you think more about the in-betweenness, I guess?
Well, first, I didn't think I was in between. I thought I'm just living in America for a while as a foreign student. You know, F2 visa is a foreign student wife's visa. So that's how I came in. So I didn't think about I was in between. I was just visiting here. And then when my identity issue wasn't really wanted to deal, and then it's a huge issue to deal with it and think about it. So I kind of put it aside, but when I became a permanent resident, my son was born, it was a different story. I think, and then at some point I was thinking, when Elaine was saying, oh, I want to be America, of course. I think you mentioned that comment, and I was listening, you know, sitting over there. It's like, did I ever want to be American? I'm not sure. So I'm proud of being a Korean, and I'm also proud of being a Korean American. But I was going this way and that way, and then struggling, you know, quite many years, like maybe 35 years. Then I just kind of like have to settle myself at some point. Do I need to really have to be somewhere and become someone else? I mean, somebody, have a title or set my identity? So it's like, oh, how about just at the middle somewhere and just floating a little bit freely? So, but that's so far until now. So I don't know, it might change it, you know. So I think we just have to figure out each person is different. You know, some people really want to fit into it. Some people really don't care about it. Some people don't even think about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been such an inspiring symposium, and I'd really like to thank our hosts and organizers from the UC Berkeley Center for Korean Studies, Laura Nelson and Stephanie Kim. Thank you. Also, a particular thank you to all the symposium participants. Your work is so important in understanding both the personal and cultural identity through history and creative practice. So a big round of applause for everybody who presented today. This symposium has really highlighted and demonstrated the importance of the Bay Area as a dynamic hub of Korean culture, from serving as the main port of entry for Asian immigrants to fostering artistic opportunities for Korean American artists across disciplines. We've heard how the Bay Area has established deep roots within the local Korean American community. The work of our speakers has revealed the ambiguous identity and cultural complexities of being Korean in the U.S., including issues of dislocation, colonization, translation, immigration, a sense of loss. In working with the artists and the curators of our current exhibition, In Between Places, Korean American artists from the Bay Area, I've been very inspired by their personal stories, and it was so nice to hear both Ron and Minji's stories today as well, and really pleased by how, in many ways, the content of their work for the exhibition has been very relatable to our students and viewers. Since the beginning of the Korean diaspora, many Korean Americans have described their cultural identity as occupying an in-between space, and this is certainly true within the art world. In Korea, Korean American art is often dismissed as American, and in the US, it's often marginalized as specifically Korean. The exhibition In Between Places claims space for Korean Americans within the landscape of contemporary art, and reflects the distinctive contribution of Korean Americans to artistic production, specifically here in the Bay Area. The exhibition and the symposium are meant to acknowledge Korean American experiences in the Bay Area and allow our visitors and attendees to reflect on the intricacies of cultural identity. And I'd like to just end by inviting all of you, if you haven't had the chance to see the exhibition on view at the Mills College Art Museum, it's on view through December 11th. And that's it. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you again to all of our participants and our hosts. I've learned a lot, which I love doing these projects, so thank you all.